Thank you, Glenn, for all you do. And it was fun meeting you and Jane and hanging out for a while. It was a lot of fun. Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Carol, and I'm grateful to be here. And thanks to all my friends who come to support me. And I love our program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm so glad to be here. Shane and Katie, welcome and congratulations on your almost 1 year. Day at a time. Today is 36 years of continuous sobriety for me, and last week was 36 years in Al-Anon. And a day at a time, I haven't had a drink since I came to you. I've been willing to go to any length to be sober no matter what, even in hard times. And when I didn't want to do it, I still suited up and showed up and was willing. And a day at a time, I haven't had a drink, not only in 36 years, but a day at a time, it's 13,150 days. And it's 1,878 weeks. And the reason I tell you that is because it was really hard for me to go any time without a drink when I started drinking. I didn't drink all day every day. I could go a couple weeks, but it was a hard couple weeks. I would say I had to white knuckle it and wish to drink and just said, if I don't, then I'm not an alcoholic. I can control my drinking, because I did a lot of controlled drinking and it didn't work well. I missed that mark. And when Adrian read the daily reflections, it reminded me of a few things. And in our book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a couple lines that really struck me when I was new. And one said, by living alone, I eliminate a lot of grief, but I also eliminate a lot of joy. And it said, when I was drinking, I was withdrawing from life little by little, and now I have to get in the social life of the world. In my 20s, I started drinking at 18. I got sober at 37 and a half, and I'm 73 and a half now. And it was fun for a while, and I tried to not get thrown up sick drunk like I saw somebody do in my early sobriety, and I missed it a lot. I did that often. And drinking was fun for a while. It let me party and talk to you and look at you and go dance and all that. But then what happened is, at the end, my last years of drinking were at home by myself, because I didn't want to drive and kill somebody. Somebody I worked with did that. Their son and another kid drove drunk and killed, one of the kids was killed. And so I started drinking at home, and what it did is it just put me in my prison. So if I wasn't at work, I was home, and I would drink after work all the time. And it wasn't fun. And I love our Alcoholics Anonymous book. And we were talking, and I heard somebody last night that got sober in 1966, and my sponsor got sober in 1965, my current sponsor. And they keep saying they read the big book and see new things they never saw before, even if they're highlighted and underlined, and I have that with me too. And I was saying before the meeting, there's a line that says, I could have never accomplished this alone. I could not have stayed sober, at least easily, without all of you. And on the bottom of page 152 in A Vision for You, it talks about we make lifelong friends. And we escape disaster. It said, you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. And I did. I rediscovered what it felt like to live. And when you shared that you have almost a year, you know what? When I had a year sober, I remember getting my 1-year medallion, and right after me, a guy got up and he got a 2-year medallion, and he said he thought his first year was the hardest, but his second year was the hardest. And I remember standing there saying, I don't want to go into my second year. My first year was really hard. I did a lot of work. My first sponsor got me into the steps immediately, and I did a lot of work my first few months sober. And I thought, I don't want to go into 2. And then this higher power that I found through you had the next person share, and what they said is, it's only as hard as you let it be. And that's been my experience. Sometimes I tell myself not to be a salmon and swim upstream and go against the flow. Not, I was one of those contempt prior to investigation people, like in Appendix A. The way I lived was my survival method till I got to you. And then you want me to give these ways up, maybe lying to not get into trouble or to get out of trouble, or just doing different ways of living. I thought I had to manage everything and control everything and fix everybody. And And what you told me is that's not my business. I don't need to do that. You told me I had to give up my crystal ball, that I don't know what's best for me and I don't know what's best for anybody else. And it was scary at first. So I try to just stick close to the program and all of you, and my life seems to work a whole lot better that way. And so that's what worked for me. Now, in other parts of our big book, I love the book. So I'm not going to read all of it, but in the story He Sold Himself Short, it says the latest part of my life has had a purpose, not in great things accomplished, but daily living. Courage to face each day has replaced the fears and uncertainty of earlier years. Acceptance of things as they are has replaced the old impatient chomping at the bit to conquer the world. I stopped tilting at windmills and instead have tried to accomplish little daily tasks unimportant in themselves, but tasks that are a part of fully living. And it goes, I now have a host of friends who accept me for who I am. And over my 8 years, I have made many real, honest, sincere friendships that I shall always cherish. And that's come true. You know, I'm wearing these little silk flowers today that my friend in Hawaii sent me for my anniversary. He sent me the box, and I got it the other day, and he said, don't open it till May 1st. And I opened it when I got up this morning. So I'm wearing them in honor of you as all my friends that love me, to remind me of how I have these special friends, many of who are here, and I got this really pretty medallion, and he had my name and the year and everything engraved on it. And it touches my heart, because, you know, when I came here, I didn't have friends. My family lived across the country. Nobody gave me grief for my drinking. And you know, I started working in New York City 3 months before my 18th birthday. I didn't get to go to college. I went right to work out of high school. And the guys at work took me out for my first drink, and you know, I didn't have what some of you have shared. See, at first I looked for the differences. For many years, it kept me out for 16 years of more drinking. I knew I had a problem in my early 20s, but I didn't get to you till I was 37 and a half. I heard somebody when I was in my real early 20s telling their story at our company. It had a big drinking problem, and I didn't know that's what he was doing at the time, but I remember talking to him. See, his drinking, when he drank, he woke up in different places and didn't know how he got there. And weeks had passed. And see, I kept saying, I didn't do that. Because I talked to him. I said, I think I have a problem drinking. And he told me to come to AA. And I didn't, because I said, I didn't do that. I didn't go to jail. I didn't get DUIs. I didn't have that. I showed up for work. But what happened when I drank is I sacrificed my morals and my values and my principles, and I did things I wouldn't have done. And then I got to feel the shame and the guilt and the remorse and the fear. And that happened. And, you know, I needed those 16 and a half years of life to happen till I got to you. And I got tricked into AA kind of, because I was dating this guy for years, and, you know, one day he showed up in a blackout. And I didn't know what to do. I knew, you know, it's funny because I think of this every now and then. A few weeks before that happened, there was a TV show, and it was some kind of a stress test thing, and yet they asked you questions. And it was like 0 to 5, you're not stressed, and it went up, and it said if you're 25 to 30, you're pretty stressed. And I had 27 out of 30, and I had no clue what was wrong with my life. None. And then his blackout, and I called somebody I knew that was in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, and she told me to go to an Al-Anon meeting. And she told me about the glass house where she went, and I got sober May 1st, 1988 at the glass house, but the week before I came into Al-Anon. But what happened is, see, I got tricked from this higher power, and, you know, when Adrian read the Daily Reflections, it said something about it. I'm not connected to you. I'm blocking myself from God. And where do I find this God? And I remember reading something in my early sobriety, and it said, God, how do I know you? Where can I find you? And it said, I'm as close as your closest breath and farther than the farthermost star. And then my book of Alcoholics Anonymous said, I can have any God I want. That's either everything or nothing. And I want mine to be everything. So I have this higher power that's gender neutral and has lots of attributes. because it's everything. I can use it like a blanket to keep me comforted, or I can use it like one of those old phone booths with 4 sides that nothing could penetrate to hurt me. And I don't invite God into my small, limited human day anymore like I used to, because I thought, well, you know, my limited human day got me to you, and my best thinking got me to you. And I want everything, so I invite myself into God's day. And I can actually say the word God now, and I couldn't when I got sober. And so that's been real important for me, too. And I love this program. You gave me a way to live that I'm comfortable in my skin, no matter what happens. But I needed those 16 and a half years, because if I didn't have them, I wouldn't have these lessons and experiences to share with all of you, like you share with me. And that's important to me. And what happened is when I went to the glass house, somebody greeted me at the door, and they told me to make coffee, and they had me set up chairs, and they had me greet people. And I couldn't even look you in the eye. I couldn't even say hello, but they told me to take the action, because I don't think my way into right acting. I change my actions, and my thinking will change. And when I got my sponsor, she said, Carol, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So if you like it, keep doing it. And if I don't, I need to change it. And I had to do that. I had to change my actions so that I wouldn't feel the way I felt. And that's what I had to do for me. And, you know, the first meetings I went to at Glass House were open AA meetings. And I sat in the back of that room, and you tell your story. And I went, I did that. That happened to me too. And I felt like that. And I identified. And they would always say, does anybody have a desire to stop drinking for 24 hours and try our way of life? And I did. And I walked up, and I got that medallion, that little aluminum coin, and they said, Carol, if you want to drink, put it under your tongue, and if it melts, you can have one, and if it doesn't, you can't. And I never melted. And so I got a sponsor named Lois, because somebody said a woman needs a meeting to her house, and I got her as a sponsor. I called her up, and she had this peacefulness and this serenity, and she was a smoker. She was confined to bed. She had a third of a lung was on oxygen. She was 22 years sober. She got sober in June 1966. And she became my sponsor. And I learned how to stay sober by not only going to in-person meetings, but by doing other types of service work, like visiting somebody at home and talking on the telephone. And she had me write to GSO in New York and say, I want to be of service. And they wrote back, and they gave me women in prison I wrote to, and they got me involved in something called Loners International, which is a meeting by mail. It's like an AA pen pal club, and I'm still active in that all these years later. And I still write letters and send shares in for them. And it's been a great joy. And, you know, I didn't know how to communicate very well when I got to you. I could talk about just general stuff, but I didn't know how to talk feelings and how to express myself. I didn't even know what feelings were. I didn't grow up where I could learn that. And by people writing letters to me and expressing things in words, I started being able to do that. And it really helped me a lot. And I had friends all over the world by letter that I never got to meet him. Well, I got to meet a few of them in person at some international conventions, and that was pretty cool. I got to go to 5 international conventions. And when I had 2 weeks without a drink, I wanted to drink. So I don't know if there's anybody new here, but you know what I did? I had to kind of start the steps right away, because I didn't want to drink. And Lois was one of those that got me through the steps right away, too. And my program with Alcoholics Anonymous, some people seem to complicate it, and that's fine for them. And, you know, my sponsor, we did it right away, because she said she didn't want me to drink, and I didn't want to drink, and I didn't want to feel that emotional pain anymore. But without a drink for those 2 weeks when I wanted to drink, what happened is I was leaving a meeting. I was at a meeting, and I was walking out the door, and a guy named John stopped me, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go drink because I don't like feeling this way. And he told me to go back in the meeting and talk to the ladies after, because he said, if I go back out, I might get a DUI, and I might go to jail. I might drive drunk and do some really serious stuff. And so I listened. See, I was brought up the oldest of 3 kids, and I had a lot of responsibility from the time I was 10 years old, and I learned to listen. And I took action that he told me. And I did a fifth step on these issues that made me feel the shame and the guilt. Because, see, when I drank, I did things I wouldn't have done. Went home with people I shouldn't have, and stuff happened that shouldn't have. And I did a lot of things I wouldn't have done. And, you know, when I came to you and you shared your story and you said you were a thief because you stole money out of your mom's wallet, or you stole this, or you did that. And I went, oh my God, I'm a thief, right? Because I didn't think of it that way. And I had to get honest about a lot of stuff. I had to look at some painful things, but you know what? Those women that I sat with when I had 2 weeks without a drink, and that shame, and we talked about, you know, one of the 9-step promises is I won't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. And that's one I wanted so bad. Every day when I looked at those promises on the wall at the meeting, I wanted that one the most. And that's what I got at 2 weeks without a drink, because those women I sat with, we talked, and there's a line in our book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says something about cling to the thought that in God's hands those deepest, darkest secrets of our past are our greatest possession, because we avert death and misery for others with that. And that's been true for me. And I've shared those secrets that I thought I would never, ever tell. And I've heard people share my secrets from the podium when they tell their story. And it gives me a lot of hope. And I hear people, you know, there's a couple of women that I really respect in Alcoholics Anonymous. I met one of them in person at a conference a few months ago, and the one is 50 years sober and the other's 47 years sober. And the one that's 47 years sober was interviewing the 50-year sober lady, and they were talking about something, and then the one who's sober 50 years said sometimes she feels inadequate when she shares or help somebody. And the one that's 47 years sober said, yeah, she does too sometimes. And I'm glad they share that, because at 36 years, I feel that way sometimes. And my first sponsor, Lois, you know, there's times she felt that way. And she still had crazy thoughts sometimes. And because they all had that and told me that, it gave me permission that it's okay for me too. When I was new, I thought I had to be perfect. I was brought up that way. And Lois had me write on a piece of paper both sides in regular size font. She told me not to cheat and write it big. I had to write, I'm only human, I'm not perfect. I didn't know how to be a kid. I didn't know how to laugh and have fun. And I'd go to meetings and you're laughing and you're having fun. You'd had covered dish dinners and you had picnics with families. And I didn't want to go, and you told me to do it. And I took the actions. You said, look for women more scared than me at meetings, and I did. And you know what? Life got better. After I walked out of that meeting from talking to those women at 2 weeks without a drink, I didn't want to drink anymore. I felt like I wasn't alone, and I'm not the only person that did those things and had things happen to. And I began to believe those women. And, you know, when I got Lois for a sponsor, you know, I kept going to meetings, and because I would come home from work and drink, she had me change my actions. She told me to go to a meeting before I go to work, because I didn't know how to go to work and face stuff sober. I didn't drink in the morning, but my actions and my behaviors, I couldn't talk to you. I used to have a sign that said, it's better to remain silent, be thought a fool, than to speak up and remove all doubt. When I was in school, the teachers put me right in front of them. My desk was right against their desk because I talked so quiet they could never hear me. See, I used to talk quietly because if I said something and you didn't agree or you didn't like it, I could change what I said if I said it quiet enough, and then maybe you didn't think I said the first thing. I wanted you to like me. I just never felt like I fit in. I felt like the ugly duckling. I didn't fit in my family, but you know what? I'm not. I'm a swan, and we're all swans. I remember on my first anniversary, one of my friends used to hear me share that, and on my first anniversary, she gave me the book, The Ugly Duckling, and on the inside, she said, you're a swan. And it made me cry. So I know I'm one of you. I read the book, and they told me to see if I identify, and I identify with a lot of stuff in our book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So when you tell your story, I'm parts of all of you too. And what Lois told me is I had to find a higher power. And I said, I have a hateful, punishing one, because I made promises. And she said, no, Carol, you're making a decision to live differently and to turn your life over to a higher power, and it could be anything I want it to be. And so at first I would trust Lois's higher power because it kept her sober, and she had something that's called contented sobriety. I've had a lot of operations and a lot of surgery and a lot of medical stuff, and I still deal with it and chronic pain on a daily basis. But she was in bed for 7 years with a third of a lung on oxygen. And, the only time I ever heard her is one time she said to me, Carol, I'm so frail. And she says, I asked my sponsor, why is God keeping me alive to live like this? And her sponsor said, because God's not finished with you yet. And I remember saying to her that God kept you alive for me because I needed her. I don't think I could have gotten the sobriety I have from anybody other than that. See, I couldn't sit still. Lois had so much patience and kindness and love. And I'd sit on her bed a lot. We talked on the phone sometimes, but I would go to meetings in person, and a lot of my meetings were sitting on her bed one-on-one. Because sometimes I'd call her and she'd say, what are you doing after work? And I said, I'm going to go to a meeting. And she'd say, come over here, we'll have our own meeting. And we did that. And I would sit on her bed and we'd talk and we'd read the big book, and we had cassette tapes. And those of you who are getting sober now, you're in the good old days. You stay sober 10, 20, 30 years. And you're going to share like what I'm telling you now. You're going to be sharing and say, you know what, when I got sober, we had a worldwide pandemic and we weren't going to in-person meetings for 3 or 4 years. And we did online meetings that had pictures and sound, and we got to meet people all over the world and have friends all over the world, sponsor people all over the world. I sponsor people in different countries, including Iran. That's beyond my imagination when I got sober. When I got sober, we had cassette tapes, we had phone booths, we had paper phone books. We ripped out deposit slips out of checkbooks and wrote our name on part of it with our phone number and gave it to somebody, and the other half we got their name and number. And we learned to call people, not wait for them to call us. Because that phone is sure hard to make phone calls when we're new. And we carried quarters because we had pay phones. It was very different back then. We had online meetings since 1986, but they were lines of chat. So imagine all 26 of us in this meeting typing in a chat room. And somebody brought up a topic, and we're all typing, and we're scrolling through all these hundreds of lines of text trying to keep up a conversation. I like this better. And I like seeing videos on because I get to know you and see you at other meetings. And when there's a black screen with a name, I don't know if I know you, and I see you at other meetings. So I treat these online meetings like my in-person meetings. And I get to go to my home group now again, because it opened up a while back. And I love this program. And so that's what I did. Lois said, if I didn't drink, would I have done the things I did? And I wouldn't have. She said, if I need a drink to be social, I'm not a social drinker. And she said, regular people don't wonder if they're alcoholics or not. They don't try to figure it out. And I had to find a higher power. And I would listen to you talk about yours. And I would try some of the things you said and some of the things you did. And some of them worked and some of them I didn't like. Like, I don't get on my knees to pray. I tried that once and it's just not for me. And what I've learned through my experience is that my higher power that I do call God, sometimes great mystery, my Native American friends call it creator. Sometimes I just call it spirit. Sometimes I don't call it anything. I just say, okay. And I do use the word God without gag. And my higher power, I've learned it doesn't matter if I'm driving in the car or sitting on a chair or taking a shower or laying in bed. I can think something and my higher power gives me an answer. I get those intuitive thoughts or something will happen. And sometimes I see it as it's happening, and sometimes I have to look back and see it. The first time I saw God, the first 2 times I saw this higher power working in my life sober, it was looking back. It was that man named John stopping me from going out again. He told me if I go out, I might not make it back. And there's a lot of people I know that went out. Some died, some made it back, and some keep thinking it's a revolving door, but it won't always be open. I've watched that happen. The second time is the day I had 30 days of sobriety because somebody asked me to read How It Works and I wouldn't do it because I was too shy, self-conscious. And that whole meeting I sat there and I didn't realize that, you know what came to my mind? That if everybody said no to an AA request, there would not be a meeting for me to be sitting in. That responsibility statement that I saw on the wall that I didn't know yet, but I saw it, came to mind. So I made a decision that day to not say no to an AA request. And I remember one day I was coming home from work and I was about a little over a year sober and I was at a stop sign. I got sober in Fort Worth, Texas, and I was coming home from work. And one day I was thinking when I was sitting at that stop sign, you know, God, I need to be more active. I haven't done a whole lot lately. I go to my meetings and I talk to people, but I think I need to tell my story, do something more. And I get home that night, and we had answering machines back then, and on my answering machine, hi, this is John from GSO, and we know you're going to the International Convention in Seattle, and we would like you to share at the Loners International meeting. And my first thought is, God, I don't think that big, but my higher power thinks that big. And I got to write to my friend in Germany, and I said, Bernie, guess what? I'm going to the International in Seattle, and I'm even getting to share at the Loners International meeting. And he wrote back and said, great, I'll know where to find you because I'm going to be there too. And I got to meet a lot of the people I wrote to. And I had a lot of God stories from going to that. But what I did this one, as soon as I did that third step, I already had to start my fourth step. Lois got me through the steps right away. She said, that's what they did in early sobriety. And if I don't want to feel the way I feel, I need to change. And so I had to change my actions. So I went to a meeting before work and I went to a couple of meetings after work. So it's either sitting on her bed or talking on the phone or being at an in-person meeting. And that's what I had to do. And it was a privilege. And I got to, you know, Lois kept stuff simple for me. And sometimes I'd whine about something and she'd laugh at it. And then she'd say, Carol, what are you grateful for? And then she would say, stand up, make me stand up sitting by her bed. And she'd say, take 2 steps and say, thank you, God. You can walk, talk, and breathe at the same time. She couldn't do it. When I was a year sober, the day I was a year sober, I had to have foot surgery. And Lois went in the hospital that day and she died May 17th. 1989. And you know what? Before that, I called her. I said, my doctor said I can't take a shower for 2 weeks when I have that surgery. And she said, how many days in 2 weeks? And I said, 14. And she said, how many days in a year? And I said, 365. And she said, so you can't take a shower 14 days out of 365 days? And I said, yes. And she said, I haven't had one in 7 years. You cannot argue with that. I will tell you, I couldn't argue with her, right? She kept my life simple and in perspective. We did the 4th step right away. I already did the worst part of my story, telling those women at 2 weeks the stuff. I didn't want to tell anybody ever. And when I got done writing that 4th step, and I thought I wrote a novel because I thought that's what you did, and she said, no, now you can do your 4th step. And she said in a general way, because it says the exact nature of my wrongs, of my defects, of the things that acted, why did I act the way I acted? And so, you know, I had to write it differently. I did some like the big book says, and we did some like the little red book, and I had to write a page on intolerance and impatience and fear and resentment and anger and different things, and write in a general way why I acted that way or why I felt that way. And I started laughing doing it because, you know what, I was intolerant and impatient and resentful because people weren't doing what I thought they should do when I thought they should do it, how I thought they should do it. Or they did things to me I didn't think were right, and then I had to look at my part and how I let these things affect me. And when I got all done with that and did my 5th step with her, you know what happened? I had an empty spot in my soul. I had no more secrets. I don't know about you, but I never had a part in my life where I never had secrets I would never tell anybody. And for weeks she would say, did I forget anything? Did I leave anything out? What I've learned is sometimes God reveals things slowly, layer by layer, like an onion, and sometimes God just rips my core open. Like, I didn't remember when I came to when I had my first drink. I kept trying to put pieces together and nothing fit. And one day I heard a lady share about she had her first drink in New York City and it was a martini. I went, oh, that was my first drink on my 18th birthday in New York. It was a martini. And I didn't like it. It tasted horrible. So the guys ordered a blackberry sour and I liked it. But I didn't have that magic feel that some of you share. Mine was progressive. My drinking was progressive. I changed what I drank for effect. I did all those things that the big book said, and I had all those bedevilments that the big book talks about. And then I had no more secrets. And what Lois said is, Carol, if you quit doing things that make you feel dirty, ashamed, guilty, and remorseful, she told me I won't feel that way. And if I don't feel that way, I won't have to put alcohol in my body to change how I feel. And from the time I was new, I said, you know what, alcohol is not an option. It is a can of Drano, it's poison. And I kept telling myself drinking is not an option. What do I need to do? And so I would do those things that I did because I didn't want to drink. And after I did that fifth step, you know what? I felt different. And when I've done fifth steps with people, it's amazing. They probably have the same thing like I felt. And I'm sure Lois saw the same thing I see in others, that knowing people trust me with their secrets, to share their life that way, but then to see people's life change, the expressions on faces, and my shoulders didn't feel so heavy, and I realized I wasn't a bad person, that I just did things and let it affect me. Till I got to you and learned different, and I had to let go of all these old ideas. I had to change my actions and my behaviors. Those defects of characters. There's a friend of mine that her name was Betsy, and one day Betsy, when I was new, she said, Carol, how was your day today? And I told her how my day went, and her comment was, God gave you a lot of chances to work on step 6 and 7 today. And I get a lot of chances to work on step 6 and 7 and all the others every day. I live the steps. This isn't something I do. This is the life I try to have. I try to live this way of life, and I don't do it perfect. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path, not perfectly. Because I sure don't do it perfectly. I'm not sure. Some days I do it thoroughly, and some days I do it to the best of my ability. It's about the best I can get. And then I had to start doing amends right away. And I could do amends from the day I came in. The day I got sober, I started making amends. Lois had me make them, and just by being different and treating people different. She said, I'm the only big book somebody may see. And somebody told me that a loving God expresses itself through me. So are my words, actions, and deeds reflecting a loving higher power? And I do I make amends. I wrote letters, and I had to do financial amends, and I just changed the way I acted for a lot of amends. There's things like people, I didn't know some of the people, so I just had to treat other people differently. And that's my way to make amends to people I didn't know how to make amends to. I had to borrow money from a bank and pay off credit cards, so I consolidated debt with a lower interest rate and had one payment. How do I make an amend for something that happened 20 years before, when I stole candy from a little gas station across the street and that guy's no longer there? How do I make an amend for that? Because that was one of the worst ones. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was like penny candy and nickel candy bars back then. How do I make an amend for that? Because I felt so bad. There's this little tiny gas station that a man named Russ owned, and he kept candy in the back for us kids. And I stole from him. And then I heard a lady on a cassette tape one day, and she said she had something similar that she couldn't make a direct amend for. And she said her sponsor and her decided that she can figure out how much it is and convert it to current money and add some interest and donate it anonymously without a tax write-off. And Lois said that would work, and so I've done things like that. And I get to act differently, and people see it. It says in our big book that our actions speak louder than words, and it says in there also that people are judging me by my actions, and I'm judging me by my intentions. So now I get to have my actions and my intentions match most of the time, but sometimes I had to check my motives, and sometimes my ulterior motives aren't what I want them to be, but I want the outcome, right? Instead of asking you directly to help me, I might hint like, gee, I just bought a new mini blind and I can't put it up. Instead of saying to my friend, I know you're pretty handy, would you mind helping me do this? See, I want them to volunteer instead of me asking. Because asking for help is really hard for me. I thought it was a sign of weakness. But what Lois taught me is a sign of strength. Because one day somebody was going to do something nice for me, and I told them no because I thought I owed them. If you help me, I owe you something. And what Lois said is, Carol, what does it feel like to do for other people? And I said, it feels really good. And she said, if I don't let you help me, I'm depriving others of the feeling of feeling good to help somebody. Because maybe it's God's way of having you have the prayers answered. See, I don't get to play God anymore. I have to also apply the traditions and the concepts to my life. Concept 5 is important. It says the minority voice is as important as the majority voice. So even if I don't agree or I might think differently, it's okay to say, because I've been in meetings and group conscience meetings and GSR meetings and where somebody with a minority voice will speak up and it changes a vote because somebody might not have looked at it that way. And the tradition, I have no opinion on outside issues. Well, that keeps me out of a lot of trouble. I had to apply that to my life a lot. The big book says there's 2 sins. One's to interfere with my own growth and one's to interfere with the growth of another. So I don't know what's best for anybody. I had a sponsor years ago. My Lois died at a year sober, and I've had 2 other sponsors die with long-term sobriety. One got sober in 1950. One got sober in 1969. They both died with really long-term sobriety. One was 45 years. One was 54 and a half years. And what I learned is they were always of service till the end. Lois, as sick as she was, as frail as she was, she still worked with me. And she gave me this program, and I just can't, I'm just so emotional and grateful for this way to live. And when I was new, I thought people at 30 years, nothing ever happened wrong, and you had this wonderful life. And I'll tell you what, life still happens, but now I have a way to deal with it. I have this higher power that loves me so much, it gives me what I like to call pop quizzes. And it's God saying, Carol, what do you know, and how are you applying it in this situation? And I say, okay, God, however this goes, I get a lesson and an experience to grow through to share with somebody else someday. And Lois taught me to always stick close to my big book because the answers are there. It's not that I don't rely on human powers because you're not going to keep me sober. You can give me suggestions, but the action is up to me, and I have to rely on a higher power for those intuitive thoughts. And so Lois got me in the habit of reading the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And she gave me certain pages, and I like to share them because this is still what I do. Now, some days I read them out of the book, and some days I know them, so I just kind of shortcut them, but the principles are there. And so I have to wake up, and as soon as I open my eyes, okay, God, good morning. Thank you for another day. Even on days that it physically hurts, I don't want to do it, but I think I do. I wake up and I say, okay, God, let's see what today is. Thank you. I'm making a decision to give you my life today. You got me in the habit of first thing in the morning and at night and sometime in the middle of the day, do a 3rd and 7th step prayer. So I told you my 3rd step. My 7th step is, God, take all of me and give me back what you want me to keep, because things aren't good or bad anymore. They're just lessons and experiences to grow through and for me to apply the principles of this program. And then she told me to read 68 to 71 so I know what kind of person I want to be and what my ideals are to try to strive by. So when I have to take actions and make decisions, are they in accordance with it? Because it says in those pages, Lois said it's not just about sex. She says about every area of my life. And it says in those pages something to the effect, if my behavior continues to hurt other people intentionally, I'll probably drink, but if it doesn't and stuff goes a different way, then I probably won't. And that's been my experience. And then she had me do steps 10 and 11, which keep me up every day, tells me what to do. And so I don't get into selfishness, resentment, fear, and anger often, but I get into procrastination. right? I'd rather sit and do my weaving or do my watercolor than do other stuff I need to be doing that's not as fun. So I ask God to remove things like procrastination, indecision, undecided, right? Frustration, because sometimes I get frustrated, I can't do what I want to do, or there's either not enough time or I don't have the energy or whatever it is. And I can ask God to remove anything, and God's going to do it in God's time, because God's time is perfect, not my time. See, where God guides, God provides, and it works. And so I do that, and I do the upon awakening. I ask God to direct my thinking, intuitive thoughts, pause when agitated or doubtful, and then, I do 10 all time, and she taught me that the word says I'm wrong, not I'm sorry. So if I do something, I have to say I was wrong for the way I acted. I was wrong for saying that. And one time I was pretty new and something happened, and she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'll go tell that person I'm sorry I said that to them. And she said, but Carol, what does step 10 say? And I said, it says, when I was wrong, she said, you were wrong. You have to tell her you were wrong, not you're sorry. And, one time I was new and I said something to somebody, and I said, I choose to not act that way anymore. I choose to not do that behavior anymore. And what they told me is they knew I was different because I never used that word. I'd make up excuses, but I wasn't direct in telling them that. And so I had to do all those things, and I still do. And she told me to be of service. And that's, my sponsor and some other women shared at a meeting online a few months ago. And every one of them was over 50 years sober, and every one of them is still in service. And that's the key. Everything in my big book for every solution, the 3rd step, the 7th step, the 10th step, the 11th step, all of them. It's be of service to God and the people about me. It's get out of me, give it to God and the care of God, not to God, but to the care of this higher power. Give it to the care of a higher power and see what God does with it. And what I've learned is my God thinks bigger than I do. Like I told you, I didn't think of sharing that in international, but God had that. And that seed was planted because I went to a conference. I was 4 months sober, and I went to a conference in Oklahoma scared to death. Never been away before. It was a few hours away, and I didn't know where I was going. It was Labor Day weekend, and a lot of experiences happened at that conference that were really amazing. But on the way home, it was Labor Day. But at that conference, there were a lot of people from Dallas. And they said, come to Dallas to our meetings. And I said, no, I won't drive to Dallas because I listen to the news every morning. And there's a lot of traffic in Dallas, so I'm not going to drive there. And I'm coming home from this conference, and I bought the cassette tapes. I cried through the whole conference. I cried a lot in my first year of sobriety. I cried a whole lot. Very emotional. And the day Lois died, I wrote her a letter, and I remember there were teardrops on it. But I'm driving home listening to the cassette tapes from this conference, and I'm crying. And I'm watching the car in front of me so I won't hit it because it's bumper-to-bumper traffic on Labor Day. And all of a sudden, I look up, and I see Stemmons Freeway and Mockingbird Lane, and those are signs I recognize from the traffic reports in Dallas. I was in downtown Dallas and didn't know I drove there. Now, how did I get there? By watching the car in front of me and trying to not hit it. And what God said that day is, Carol, you can do things you didn't think you can do. Just do what's right in front of you, and you can do amazing things you never thought you could do. See, I didn't know the interstate forked off to go back to Fort Worth. God lets me have my dreams. And God gives me way beyond what I could have imagined. In 2005, I bought a 8-year-old used camper van in Arizona, got a loan, and God led me to this camper van, and I bought it. She had 25,000 miles, and I used it. And because of having a lot of surgery and cancer and a lot of stuff, at 60 and a half, I retired before I wanted to. And if I worked longer, it would have been better off, but that's not what God's plan was. And I got in my camper, and I drove 12,000 miles round trip from South Florida to North Washington. And I had amazing experiences and got to meet you. And I even had mechanical stuff happen. And what I've learned is where God guides, God provides, and God never left me stranded anywhere. And now my camper van is 112,000 miles. And I got to go visit Glenn about a year and a half ago, and it was amazing. And I got to meet several of you. And I'm hoping to leave the end of June on a trip and go west again, maybe get to meet some of my friends that are on here. I'm hoping. We'll see what God's plan is. And we'll see. I never know, you know. I just suit up and show up and say, okay, God, show me what you got. What's your plan today? I don't have expectations. I had to give up my crystal ball and my expectations. And I've learned that this program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the traditions and the concepts, they work through anything. And being of service is fun, and I find different ways to be of service. And what's neat is to find ways to keep enthusiastic, because that's what's the joy of being in Alcoholics Anonymous. Look for the new people. Look for the people more scared than me. Look for somebody that's sharing and they go, oh, I have that happening now, or that I still have that unresolved. I need to talk about that with somebody and get numbers. And I can do that online. I ask for your number if I hear a speaker. Sometimes it's connect others. And what I've learned is I can work through the steps in anything. And I can work through them peacefully. You know, in 2010, I had 4 more surgeries, and I had 3 real close, and I had to have a 4th, and I didn't want it. I was really upset. I was crying. I was talking to somebody. I was driving back from Tennessee, and I was talking to somebody, a sponsor, and telling her what was going on. And she said, Carol, what would you suggest I do if I called you with what's happening in my life? See, when I got sober, we didn't have cell phones. And when something's happening, what do? I can't call anybody and get an immediate thing. Most everybody I knew worked, and we would leave messages on answering machines. And so I would say, okay, what did I hear? Or what did I listen to on a cassette? Or what have I read in the big book? Or I'd open the big book and say, God, let me see what you want me to. What do I do here? I'd read step 11, pause when agitated or doubtful, and ask for an intuitive thought, and it would come eventually. And I said, I'd say, pray about it and work through the steps. And so I did. I hung up the phone with her, and I worked through the steps on it. Right? God, I'm powerless over my health. I choose to not let it make my life unmanageable. God, restore my sanity here. God, I made a decision to give you my life. If this is what you want to happen, okay. 4 and 5, I just talked to somebody about it. 6 and 7 is always my hang up. It's not going the way I want. It's not working the way I want it to, whatever that situation is. And when I realize my hang up is in 6 and 7, and I let it go and say, okay, God, I surrender. However you want this, okay, I'm all right with it. And the amends, who do I hurt? Usually it's me. So how do I make an amend to me? By being different, taking an action, calling the doctor. I called, he said, I'll fit you in right away because I'm going on vacation. And I go, well, God, that's not what I want, but okay, God. And it works out the way God wants it to. And then I call you and I say, what's going on in your life? Because that's the solution, is get out of me. Because if I'm holding on to it, God can't work in it, is what I've learned. And I've learned this program works through anything. I've had great joys and great sorrows sober. And you know what? I love our program. I have a big book study I started on a Sunday morning. Went through the book once, and now we're on the second go round. And I invited my friend from Georgia who does archives and history, and he comes, and we really go through the big book, and we add a lot of history to it. We go down little rabbit holes, and we've got a group of people who love history like we do, and then they add to it, and it's been a joy. And we've done a book study with the 12 and 12 and the concepts, and I go to lots of online meetings. I go to like 4 to 8 a day most of the time because I don't have anything else, and I find ways to be of service in lots of different ways. And it's fun, and I love our program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it says in Keys to the Kingdom, it says this program allows for limitless expansion. I'm never going to outgrow it. And it talks about where I used to run from responsibility, I find myself attacking things with surprise and vigor, applying the principles of this program. And on the top of page 100, it's one of my other favorite promises. See, there's lots of promises in our book. And it says something about me and a new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. And maybe one of you I don't know is my new person today. And it just says, if I persist, remarkable things will happen. says, when I look back, I'll find the things that came to me when I put myself in God's hands are far more wonderful than I could have imagined. So follow the dictates of a higher power. And I'll live in a present, new and wonderful world no matter what my present circumstance. And it's not always looking back. Sometimes I get to see it as I'm walking, like today. It touches my heart. So many of you are my friends that came here, that you call me and send me text messages, and that God loves me so much, God gives me the pop quizzes. Carol, what do you know? How are you applying it? How are you going to grow through this and share it someday? Because that's all it's about. I go through life and I don't think about drinking and not drinking anymore. I know my time's up, and I thank you so much for having me here. Glenn, I appreciate all the service you do. You're a special part of my life, you and Jane and all of you. So thank you for letting me share my anniversary with all of you.